Salut, ça va, and welcome to another episode of SEO Presso. My name is Björn Darko, and today I'm speaking to Julien Deneuville. He's a web marketing and data consultant for Databulle. He's also an OnCrawl Ambassador. He has extensive experience in SEO since over a decade. Used to be a co-founder, used to work as director SEO for Cluster in Paris. And today we are speaking about SEO testing. SEO Presso is presented to you by Searchmetrics, and Searchmetrics offers a content and SEO platform that enables online marketers and companies to grow organically. And if you want to know more about Searchmetrics, please go and visit searchmetrics.com. And please don't forget to subscribe to the SEO podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere where you found great podcasts. Salut, Julien. How are you?
I'm fine. Thanks a lot. I'm really thrilled to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm also super excited, especially because we speak about SEO testing, a topic that I had in the podcast so far, and I think not really many SEOs are doing it. And I want to identify today if it really brings value to SEO as a job itself. And I want to kick in the door with a very bold question in the beginning, because SERPs are so dynamic. They're changing very often. Google is changing a lot on a daily basis. It's actually really hard to identify if what you do as an SEO really, made the impact that you were hoping for. So is testing really a methodology that clearly can state an impact based on the testing?
Yeah, so in my opinion, there are several layers when talking about testing, several methods, but especially the first one in my mind is making sure your website is doing well in Google search and other search engines, especially nowadays with helpful content update, for example, but there are also other updates always with Google. In fact, there are a lot of tools now to check your traffic, to check your rankings, and so on. For this kind of testing and monitoring, I'm quite sure most of people do that. It's really a need and a basic, but it's very, very important. And as you said, it can also help you to just verify if your optimizations, your changes are working the way they should. So, for example, if you change something on the web page, does it rank better? Does it bring more traffic to your website? You can see that very quickly when you have the right tools set up.
If you say tools, like you said, it's a very specific case that you want to test rather than you're looking at the website holistically. So you have a specific hypothesis, I would say, right, for a very specific case, and then you use tools in order to do so. And I believe that it is really important to have a hypothesis. Otherwise, because the rankings are so volatile and, the SERPs are changing, quite often, you need to really have a hypothesis and a clear metric that you go against in testing. Would you agree on this?
Yeah, partly. In fact, I really agree with you with the fact that we need to test against an hypothesis and check if we were right. What I would quite disagree on is about choosing one KPI, for example. Yes, you need one KPI to validate your hypothesis, but you also need to broader point of view and see if other things change as well. Maybe things you could consider as correlated to your first KPI, but maybe also other KPIs to be a little bit more specific. If you change something on a website or on a web page that brings better rankings, it's good. But if it's bad for conversion, for example, you have to take that into account too. And maybe more traffic, but less conversion won't be good enough for your business. Always keep an eye on the broader picture.
Yeah, and I guess it's like with any statistics or any kind of statistical approach, you need to reach a significance level to really say, okay, on that scale, it really worked out or not, right?
Yeah, there are formulas to calculate the number of visits. For example, you need to have a representative traffic, for example. But mostly what's very important and what I see sometimes being forgotten by people is to always test against something where you didn't change anything. What happens when I change something, but what did happen where on the other pages where nothing happened? Did have really an impact because of the changes I did? Was the change just with maybe a Google update or seasonality or stuff like that? So always have a kind of a witness. I hope everybody will have understood what I mean.
A bit. Like we talked about hypothesis, right? And, you know, in order to come up with a hypothesis, you need to have a plan on what you want to test, right? What, from your perspective, are really good, setups for tests? So what is it worth to test where you can reach significance and where you can really move a needle at the end of the day?
I believe it's always kind of difficult to proper A/B test in SEO because you need Google to be able to access the new page. It's not as easy as a traditional A/B test where you can use a tool that won't be seen by Googlebot, for example. It's always a bit difficult, technically speaking. But what I really like to be able to do is to take only a few pages on the website, maybe a category, maybe just some random pages, depending on what I want to test, and be able to really change these pages, but not the rest of the website. What I have in mind is a test we did a few weeks ago, in fact, with one of my clients. So we are on a website with about maybe 80,000 pages that look all the same. Let's say those are listings. And we just changed a few dozens of these pages to transform them into landing pages. So with a lot more text, a lot more images and so on, and a lot less products. And so the idea was to just test this on some random pages and see if we could get some better results with landing pages and not listings. So really the idea is to be able to do that, to take the same URL, take the same page, but change one thing or maybe several things, always comparing to other pages where nothing changed.
Is that what you would consider as an SEO split test, so to speak, or a URL split test, where you take similar page types and you do changes and then compare to another chunk of similar pages where you don't do the changes?
Yeah, that's it. In fact, in practice, the problem is often you can't just change random pages. You will often be required to change all the pages in one category, for example, or so on. So the risk is to have some bias in our testing, but then again we have to try also. So it's not a perfect split testing, but it's a test anyway. And if really nothing works, you can always roll back and go back to the previous version of your page. So ideally, you have to pick random pages, but make do with what you can do. And even if it's not perfect, theoretically speaking, if it works and if you can see there is an improvement, well, you've won already.
Would you consider doing those tests on rather URLs that might not be the biggest revenue contributor? So my question is, like, would you risk to take pages that are really important to do those tests, or rather pages that are for now not so important, in order to prove a point and then roll it out to those pages that are more contributors to revenue, for example?
Well, I'd say it depends. Really, it's a question of context, and sometimes you can take some risks with your top pages, but on other contexts it's not possible. What I like to do when I don't want to take too many risks is to target pages where I want to improve. For example, pages that rank above the first page of results in Google. So if I want to gain a few ranks with these pages, I don't risk much changing anything on these because they already don't perform very well. So if they perform even not as good, well, it's not that bad for me. But if I can go on the first page of Google, I'll bring in more traffic. So it's very interesting. If I can't take some risks with top pages, I'll try to target this kind of page where a small improvement can really make a difference. And so often my clients are willing to take some risks.
You were in the beginning also talking about, taking landing pages, adding images to it, adding content or changing content to it. If we would now just look at high level on page things like title tags, meta descriptions, stuff that Google is also from their side changing all the time in order to cater for the search intent, for example, right? Or URL testing, like all those things where Google said that needs to be descriptive, it needs to be fulfilling the intent and so on and so forth. Have you ever done testing that, proves that it sometimes is not like Google says?
In my experience, most of the time when Google changes something in your title or in your description, mostly they are quite right. So what I try to do is to take inspiration by these changes and maybe try to replicate these. It's not always possible, of course, but sometimes it's quite interesting to tell yourself, well, if Google changes my title for this title, maybe I should use this new title from Google directly and see what happens. To be very honest, I did this kind of test in one of my small websites, my private websites, and it did not change anything in terms of rankings. But then again, it's SEO, so I encourage anybody to try it at home and see what happens.
I really like what you said, and I completely agree with you. Because there's a lot of discussion also in the SEO world about, Google is changing my description, changing the titles, but you're actually completely right. If they do so, then your title might be shit and you should reconsider, rewriting them in order to cater for, a user intent or a user query that might fit better, right? And I completely love this. But let's stay on the title and meta description for a bit, because from my perspective, it's your card that you show, your advertisement that you show on the SERP, and it can, as you said, might not have an impact to rankings, but if you test a lot with it on the click-through rate, for example, that's also super important. Have you done anything where you said, like, it's a good way to test titles and descriptions compared to click-through rates?
Well, in fact, to answer your question and come back to what you said, when Google changes my title or my description, to be honest, I don't really care. What I care about is to bring clicks on my results. So what I will monitor, what I will check is more what my competitors are doing and what they are doing that I'm not. I've got some specific cases in mind, but for example, if my snippet is very simple, but I have competitors on the same SERP with rich snippets or emojis in the description and so on, I will try to include these on my page and see what happens. Sometimes it works, sometimes it's not very effective, but that's more the kind of stuff that tickles me to just check what my competitors do.
What, like, if you review all the testing that you have done, like, was there a biggest wow or aha moment where you said, wow, I didn't expect that it has such a big impact?
Wow, that's a tough question. To be honest, the test I was talking about when we changed from listings to landing pages, I was quite sure it would have a good impact on traffic and on conversion, but I was very surprised with the good results we had. I did not expect this to be as good. So that's probably the most recent example I have in mind.
And do you think it's based on maybe serving the wrong user intent with a listing page in the first stance?
Well, in this specific case, it's a bit complicated because our pages were very, very different from our competitors. We were mostly the only website with listings, and every other website was having landing pages with a lot of content and so on. I was a bit skeptical, to be honest, because I didn't know if we were ranking because we were super relevant for the intent, or because we were a bit different from what the rest of the web was doing. It seems we were very relevant because with the same kind, it's always a bit difficult. And I also always try not to be biased, and even if we need, like we said earlier, an hypothesis to test against, I always try also to keep an open mind. And if a test is not conclusive, it's a learning tool, Maybe you just learn that you shouldn't do this, but maybe test something else. So it's always a bit difficult. You never really know beforehand what will happen. Mostly when you do this kind of testing, in fact, in my experience, mostly when I did this, it was to prove my clients that what I was asking to do was effective, and to have data to show maybe the hierarchy, the big boss in a company that we will be asking a lot to our developers because we will need to make a lot of changes. But if it brings a lot more business for you, it's win-win.
I agree. We talked about, coming up with a hypothesis, running a test, and then also measuring it. But we didn't really talk about the setup, how, you create your testing environment. Can you elaborate a bit on how, like a general testing environment setup looks like for you? What tools are you using? How do you document, monitor, etc.?
Well, that depends too, and mostly it depends on the habits my clients may have or not. I work with some companies where A/B test is part of the DNA, so no problem doing this kind of stuff with a very documented approach. For example, I know some companies that will maybe try to predict the results with something like Facebook Prophet, for example, and then see if the actual results match the prediction. So that's very, very interesting, very advanced. But to be honest, just having a well-configured analytics and ranking tool can also suffice just to test some smaller hypotheses. Maybe you don't need to have a bazooka to kill a fly, as we say in French. but yeah, if your setup is reliable enough and you can trust your data, you don't need to have the perfect theoretical setup and the most advanced tool to make it work. Of course, if you can have those, it's always better. But if you need to delay your test for months and months because you want to have the good tool, you won't do anything, in fact. So I prefer to do stuff and maybe get the wrong results. But I prefer that instead of not doing anything and maybe lose a big opportunity.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I also think on the setup, you also need to kind of, create a laboratory environment, meaning that you need to make sure that nothing else will be changed or done to a landing page in order to really, isolate your test and make sure that it has an impact. It was a pleasure talking to you, Julien. Time is up already. If you outside want to know more about testing and how Julien is doing it for clients, please reach out to him on LinkedIn. He is definitely. Thank you very much for coming to the podcast and sharing your experience. Thank you for tuning in. We see and hear us next week again on the SEO Presso podcast. Ciao.